Thanks again for joining us, folks. You know, we've all become familiar, unfortunately, with the sad and dangerous stories that surround the internet and children. But our guest today is here to help make sure that your child doesn't become one of those statistics and a part of that tale. Please welcome Audrey Gusky, and we appreciate you being here today, Audrey.
Good to be here, John.
Always a pleasure. Let's talk about places like MySpace and this new one that I'm not familiar with.
Facebook.
Facebook. These are places where kids, they're the hot new internet locations for kids, and I've never been on either, but I've heard of MySpace.
Right.
And the things I've heard, unfortunately, are not good. They seem to be a place that young kids go and just tell everything to the whole world about themselves.
Right. Well, first of all, let's tell your viewers specifically what it is. They're online social networking systems. And Facebook is more related to college students. So you have to either be enrolled in a college, junior college, some university, in order to get online there. So they're a bit safer, but still not as safe as they possibly could be.
Right. But at least you're talking adults or close to adults.
Well, they're college students,
Yeah.
so they're typically all the same age, and they usually do it through their university, and so there's that great connection. MySpace is huge. It's tripled in the past year as far as users. It's 85 million users.
Yeah,
Rupert
Murdoch
bought it for $1.5 billion through one of his companies. And when you think about that, what he's trying to do, obviously, is get in touch with this age group, which is a huge, huge market for him.
Sure.
The problem is these kids, to them, it's a way to express themselves. You and I used to talk on the phone a lot when we were growing up and dating people. And in the years past that, you had pen pals. Well, nowadays, this is sort of like the reality TV show of the internet. The students, the kids love going online because they can express themselves, use music, pictures, you know, whatever images to present themselves to the world.
And they really spill the beans, don't they? I mean, you know, you and I you mentioned the telephone, and that's all we had growing up, and the biggest concern I had, I can remember, was, you know, that mom or dad or my brother or sister might pick up the other line somewhere else in the house, you know, and sneak a little listen to my conversation.
Yeah.
But that, you know, that's child's play in comparison with what some of these kids run the risk of potentially facing today.
Absolutely, and there's supposed to be restrictions and constraints in place for Facebook and MySpace. For example, if you're under 14, you're not supposed to be using the service. If you're over 20, you're also not supposed to be. If you're over 20, you're not allowed to talk to anyone under 18.
Yeah,
but of course, no one's regulating that because that's nearly impossible to do.
Right.
And the problem is, if these kids are putting on this information where anybody can see it, predators can monitor where they're working, what time they're working, what different clubs or what different hangout places they're at with their friends. And to kids, it's a status thing. The more friends that they have that tap into because they can count how many friends they have. And in a sense, they try to find these friends and get more friends on there because it's a matter of popularity. Everybody sees how many friends there are. And my daughter said very nicely, she's 20 years old, and she said, Ma, it sort of cuts out all the middle garbage when you're meeting people. You meet someone at a particular party or a dance one night, and then instead of sharing all the information, I go to this school, I do this, you just give them your last name and they go on MySpace and they can find all that information about you immediately. So in a way, that's a good thing, but it's a bad thing too because it's sharing way too much information.
Well, and you know, you would think that kids from all of the harping that we've done now for the last 20 years or so, it seems like, don't talk to strangers, you know, don't go with this person if you don't know them. Why, with all of that preaching that's been done in the last quarter century, would these kids go online and just spill the beans?
I think they don't recognize how dangerous this actually is, and they think it will happen to someone else, but not to me. I'm too smart, I'm too wise. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm not. But 14% of the people, John, who are on these sites tend to meet people who they only met through online services.
You mean they
actually meet them physically? And so,
oh my gosh, so 1.5 out of every 10 people who get online go somewhere and meet a person they've contacted?
Yes, exactly. So that's very scary. And also, kids need to be aware when you're putting things online, things that are illegal, whether it's drinking, doing drugs, whatever, you could lose your job, your summer job. You could lose potentials for jobs in the future. You could be kicked off sporting teams. You could not get into the good colleges if you want to. So it's huge, huge repercussions for these kids because colleges now and employers are checking MySpace and looking at the personality and the activities and habits of these children. And so as a result, it's huge, and it could be detrimental to their future.
So would you recommend, Audrey, that kids not go on MySpace or Facebook or whatever it's called?
There are ways to do it, John. You know, obviously don't share any information that you wouldn't want anybody else to see. So whether it's a parent, a teacher, a future employer, don't put anything on that's going to deter you know, their image of you. You also have to be careful about what you're adding as far as strangers. As I had told you before, a lot of these kids like to add friends to the list, but only, and you can say you don't want this person to be your friend and then you don't communicate with them online. So you have to be real careful about that. And if there's any kind of harassment or hate speech or inappropriate conduct, you definitely want to report that as well. You have to be careful. Don't post anything secret, anything private, anything people can come back to you and track you down.
And if you have something, like you just mentioned, something offensive, inappropriate, who do you report it to?
You would report it to those on-site facilities, yes, and they would take care of it. And you would definitely should follow up on that and contact them several times to make sure they're doing something about that.
All right. Dr. Audrey Gusky, Duquesne University, thanks so much for being here. Pleasure indeed, and we'll see you again soon.
Definitely.
Meanwhile, folks,